you?
Oops.
Oh, you're flashing.
Yeah.
You're flashing on and off. You said the word spirit and your video started flashing on and off. Oh, there it goes
Oh,
again.
bad person.
Yeah, you got some spirits messing with your video. All
No,
right.
we can make that. Well, in Swedish we would say you have bad radiation. Like your that's your personality thing. We like to joke like that in Swedish. Oh,
Yeah.
it's your radiation that's bad. If something happened, you can make it. Doesn't match English language for a joke.
Well, I just thought it was weird because you said, "Oh, talk about spirits," and then it flashed off, flashed
What?
on, flashed off, flashed on. You know, flashed off, flashed on. So, three. I'd take that as a serious note that the spirits are hanging with you today.
They are partaking.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So we've kind of had this conversation like sort of back and forth on on Skype before, right?
Hmm.
About a lot of shamanism stuff and spirit stuff, and um, just there's just a lot of stuff, on the internet these days that you know, a lot of things that people are kind of messing with. And I'm not saying that people are right or wrong. I'm just saying I've had a lifetime of training, and I'm super particular about conducting, relationships with things that I have no validated proof if they're what they say they are, because most of the time that they're not. And the other thing too is that, most importantly is that, a lot of the teachers I've had, native teachers, medicine teachers, my grandmother was a prophet. So I've had some, shamanism family members and legitimate prophets. That my grandmother was an exorcist and a prophet of the Pentecostal church. So I've had a lot of experience kind of with these things as well. And pretty much the bottom line, like what it boils down to is that the more shiny, you know, enlightened, dazzling the being, usually the more dark and demented they are. Because if they wanted to talk to anybody, they could just show up and have a discussion with you. They wouldn't need to actually come through one person or one medium. They wouldn't need to make their information, really enlightened cosmic information, that people just take hook, line, and sinker. They wouldn't need all of the dazzling, right? They could just show up and have discussions at any point in time. And most of the time, from the experience I've had, and looking at other people's work who've actually told the truth about some of this stuff, that these are not good beings. And it's bizarre to me because there are so many like books that have been written since like the 70s on even, like extraterrestrial beings and all these other beings that, just kind of spew out all this. I mean, look at, what is that book called? I always forget, but it's like 700 pages. And I think it came out in like the 80s or something like that, but it's like this, channeled piece of work. And, the other thing too is like you can always, later on, like in the last, 12 years, I've really studied a lot of Steiner's work. And he talks a lot about the 30 different groups of beings that actually make kind of being a human work in our, like our development, and all the different roles kind of that are played. But you know, he got his information through the Akashic records. You know, so I was asking a teacher last winter. This was kind of an interesting conversation because I always put the nails to people, right? I'm
Okay.
always the person that asks the questions that they probably had hoped that nobody would ask.
So that's a voodoo doll, the nail.
Yeah, well, I just make them feel like, you know, I put the, you know, tack to them, you know,
Okay.
force them to answer the question. But we had this really great teacher for 6 months through 2 programs last winter online through the Biodynamic Association. And most of it was geared towards agriculture, but we studied, you know, the first half of esoteric science, which is, you know, Rudolf Steiner's scientific work, and how all of this, you know, was developed over time and how things became, you know, solid. And so there's a lot of people on the planet that have, I guess, never read his stuff. They should. He was murdered, I think, in like 1924, 1926. He was poisoned by the Dark Brotherhood because, you know, they obviously didn't really want him and his prolific information being out in the public. So a lot of people get this stuff wrong. You know, they get wrong this whole Saturn thing. And the way that Steiner talks about, you know, Saturn, the original Saturn, it wasn't even a solid planet. You know, how things were kind of birthed out of it. It was like an energy field, right? Because we've had to make, you know, with these other beings, you know, we've made all of these progress and then finally, you know, come into a physical body. And then we're taking the physical human and we're developing it through what Steiner called the 6 epochs. And we're not very far into the 5th post-Atlantean epoch, which is the thinking one, right? This is where we actually develop the ability to think, because we really can't actually have freedom if we can't think, right? So it's always interesting to me so a few of the questions that I asked my teacher, you know, we're studying a lot of this kind of stuff and why agriculture is going to matter, why it's going to matter into the future, into the, you know, 6th epoch and the 7th epoch. The 5th epoch that we're in ends 3572. So a lot of people that are in this new age stuff and talking to all these spirits, to me, is kind of a fraudulent activity, because we're not even in the position to be actually able and have the intellectual capacity to actually think, right? Because this is what we just started to develop since 1410. And it's part of the human evolution towards, you know, total freedom, you know. But we're going to be here on the planet and we have to work with the planet. We're being tested. Even Steiner said in the future that there'll be so many places on Earth that will not be inhabitable. And so this is one of the reasons that he, you know, brought through the ethers 500 years. He went 500 years into the future. And he accumulated this information through the Akashic records on the biodynamic preparations to actually restore soil, because whoever had this information in the future was going to have a little enclave to be able to have soil and to be able to grow something and actually grow food. So Steiner was heavily involved, you know, with like science. He was, you know, had doctorates. His big thing was nutrition. He'd already seen like massive nutritional problems during the turn of the century. He attempted to educate doctors. That's why they have anthroposophy medicine. It's a totally different type of medicine. To this day, there are some colleges and stuff in Europe that you can go to after you get out of MD school. It has a lot to do with alchemy and working with plants and different parts of the plants and metals. And it's just like, it's kind of amazing kind of work. But So during the course of these two, classes last winter, we were talking about the Atlantean period, and Lemuria period on Earth, and what, probably was here during those periods, right? Because it wasn't really a completely solid world. I mean, we had just started kind of, taking on physical bodies and starting the human development. So one of the things I asked him was that, so if that's true, and, we look at like Steiner's work, then that means that a lot of the people who are, telling stories online about these memories of Atlantis and all this other stuff and this technology is kind of fraudulent, right? Because humans, we were not really with it. I mean, we didn't have the ability to think, right? We were still probably in what Steiner called a feeling state, so we were just kind of more primal. And so my teacher asked me, so what do you think when you think about people talking about the way that they do about Atlantis? And I said, well, I've always kind of had this feeling that maybe it was higher evolved beings that were actually working here on the planet to try to get some stuff going, right, for the human, right, for the human development. And so they would have had, bigger technology. So even if, we remote view from where we're at now and we look into that period of time, we misunderstand that humans had that kind of technology. Because the type of human being that we're looking through the eyes of, looking at Atlantis, is not the same one that we are now. That those ones are different than we are. I mean, obviously, genetically, there's been lots of times on the planet that whole societies bottlenecked, and disappeared. And so he said that's probably exactly what's right, is that a lot of these people that think that they're remembering stuff from Atlantis probably aren't. And they could have, a fantastical mind, and they could actually be making some of this stuff up because they don't have the ability to think things through and ask themselves questions as they're seeing whatever they're seeing. And then the other thing is too, is that they may be seeing something in that past that humans were not part of, right? So you're going to that point in time and you're looking at this thing with all this technology and all this other stuff. Could be a certain beings that are involved with the development or helping to get humans going on the planet, and that they're there with some of their technology, creating it, installing it, and we take that as that was us and that we had that technology, when that's not true at all.
Well, and I
So my teacher made a joke.
Okay.
So I said, then, why are all these people so prolific at manufacturing, the human living in Lemuria, and it was like advanced, in Atlantis, and it was advanced and all this other stuff. And he said, well, the internet is not the Akasha record.
Sure.
So the thing is, like, what he's saying is you can't believe, pretty much anything that's on, on the internet and what's being. And the other part about it that's really sad is that people are not focused in on developing themselves. They think that they're somehow. I just got in an argument with a younger friend of mine about this, and she's like, well, I want to go to this, bending spoon class and all this other stuff. And I said to her, like, you have a son, you're a single mom, you don't have a job, you're not even taking care of your son properly. I mean, what would make you want to pay money to go to a bending spoon class? I mean, do you want power? Do you, want to have some kind of ability so that you could prove who you are to whoever? Are you just doing it so that you can be cool with other people? I mean, you're like, where is your intellect leading you that you would take money that you don't have and away from your child and go pay for a class like that? That means, and today it means absolutely positively nothing. When you should be like, utilizing that money to make your son's life, number one, better.
Sure.
Getting a roof over your head, you know what I mean? And a lot of other foundational things. But the problem is that humans can't think. That's the problem, is that there is a huge amount of lack of thinking. And that's why we're in this epoch, because we'll never be free. Steiner talks about it, that we'll never be able to have freedom until we actually learn how to actually think. Because we have to learn to override all of our emotional reactions that are weird, that the stimuli that's coming from the outside world, our chemistry is just reacting to it because we haven't learned the ability to think and actually internalize that thinking into questions like, why am I feeling this way? Well, why would I feel this way? Do I feel this way all the time? Are there certain events that make me feel this way? In order to actually get back control from being reactive to a world that's basically an illusion. So when I see a lot of this stuff going on, with spirits and people channeling, some of these beings and all this other stuff, I'm anybody that actually could think, critically think, wouldn't just jump into something like that. You would say, well, what would be the long-term consequence of this? What would be the long-term consequence of myself, my family, my children, the people that are around me? Like, what happens if these beings, don't have control anymore, and that I'm not available to them all the time, right? There's a lot of things that start to happen. And like that one video I sent you, like, don't believe, channelers bull crap. It's a video I did a long time ago. And it was based on a story of a Lakota Sioux medicine woman that I did a year apprenticeship with when I was 23. I'll be 52 in December, so that tells you how long ago it was. And we constantly were getting people who were working with beings and who were channeling these beings, and then the beings would start taking over their entire life. And you know what? These people were more than happy for ego reasons, right? Because it made them important.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It gives them some kind of status and to be looked up to, because these beings, have picked this person. And so these beings were not easy to get rid of from some of these people. We had some serious backlash. One that we actually removed, and we didn't really, when the guy came in to have the session, it was 3 hours, took 3 of us to pull this thing out of his, energy field, right? And to eliminate it. And we had no idea, because we had done a lot of these, and the one that was in him didn't seem as strong as some of the other ones, so we didn't actually prepare for it. But when it got removed, it targeted us. It targeted all 3 of us. It targeted our households. It targeted our jobs. It targeted one of us. It made them so unbelievably sick and physically sick that they literally could not get out of bed for weeks. They couldn't even get into a car to go to the hospital. They were like so sick. So, we just, sometimes you don't really understand what the consequences of. And the other thing too is that whenever you lose your freedom, right? When you have other beings that are dictating, information to you, you become their receptionist and their secretary. you know, you probably wouldn't do that with another human. At some point, you would say, look, I have stuff I have to do. So why don't you go find another secretary or receptionist that's willing to work for free? So then you have to ask yourself, like, nobody does anything for free. What are you getting out of it? And then how long is that going to last before you start to resent the situation? And now you can't actually get rid of what you've made contracts with. Because usually when we go into this stuff, when beings start to talk to us, I tell them now, I'll say things like, there was one a couple of weeks ago, and I just said, I'm not interested. So go talk to somebody else. Like, I'm just absolutely not, I'm not interested. I don't have the time to be interested. There's nothing that you could possibly tell me that is going to, make any difference in my life.
And that was an energetic being. Is that what you?
Yeah. Another thing too is, like, if you want me to talk to you or you want me to do something for you, then you know what? Put $1 million in my bank account. Pay me for my time. And if you can't physically do that, then you can't really do anything, can you? So what would be the point of me continuing to have an interaction where I give you 100% of my time? And this used to happen. I used to have tons of beings that talk to me all the time. A lot of ghost people, because that's the kind of work I do on people, osteopathic work and muscle memory work and releasing that. And so when I'm working on people, sometimes what will happen is that people that have passed over, known or unknown, will start to bother me before the session. Like in the shower, they're going to want to talk to me if I'm driving down the road. And so I don't allow that. I haven't allowed that since, my 30s probably. And so I used to deal with a lot of these things. And after a while, it was like I had to, like, all these stupid other spiritual people, they're like, oh, well, you can't, you can't set up boundaries against those people because they don't understand time. And it's like, well, that is precisely right. If I allow them to walk all over me, that's what they're going to do. So I have this free zone. It's from 9 at night till 9 in the morning. And I don't like to be bothered by anything supernatural at all. So since, my early 30s, I've had this, thing that I deal with, and these boundaries that I've set up, because I've been like this my whole life. I was telling you earlier today, my grandmother being a prophet in the Pentecostal church and an exorcist, I saw her release the first, spirit that had been taken hold of somebody when I was 6 years old. And there were like 5,000 other people that were sitting there that actually saw the thing rise up out of the person onto the ceiling before it left, floated away, and it left. So because I spent my summers, in California with her and my family, a lot of it I spent on the river with my hillbilly family, frog gigging and catching catfish and, running the Kings River with my uncle and stuff like that. But then, every once in a while when I was in her household, I'd have to go to church on Sunday. And then this is where a lot of this stuff took place. So
yeah, let me try to think a little bit, because you teach me, and in my experience, I pick up what will develop my own.
Because it just totally kicked us off of Skype. So here we go. But anyway, you were saying.
Well, yeah, I try to, let me interact something at least, and in doing so, I will name you, or my own experience in life to understand and to have a broader perspective. I will look at things that is new or unfamiliar to me, and in doing so, I would go back to myself and say some of the talents that's natural. The saying is in science that before 12 years age, a lot of all of us have so-called extra talented things. We're skilled in some aspects that in grown life will be called like a super something you're very gifted or something very special like. So in my case, I was very close to music. So that's what I can keep and be very close. And I can also observe myself as being intelligent or prone to actually be triggered by sound or by that's like that you're talking about energy. So and in sound of energy, that's like the physical energy, but well, energy is physical and also that kind of unseen side. But actually my eye will be an instrument to register something, to collect something. And actually that's my inner musical side is actually it's like an eye for music. So well, actually the ear, of course, and then the connection with an instrument, because well, actually the eye is an instrument. So that's that you can see I try to make parallel sides of something that's actually very connected. If I play an instrument, well, that's also an instrument, and it can create things, and it's connected to me in my inside, and my love or my comfort or the thing I gain from, or the reason I stay in music and it is important for me. But the energy, that's very much energy in it, and it's like that I can really go into and understand that, or understand I should say. I can be with it, and it is something of a world I will be familiar with. But I am probably like the others, passing over 12 years age, losing a lot of the things maybe I was allowed or could be closer to understand when I was younger. But these spirit things, or those kind of energies, a lot of us are not close to it, or don't see or understand well, can really navigate those areas. So I come from the perspective of that's something I probably lost, or maybe never had, or maybe the talent for it, whatever. So it's interesting to listen to. During my path in life, I will describe it as maybe quite curvy. I have a passion for learning or discovering new things. I tend to pick up along the road what's most interesting of it, and I come to put aside the scientific kind of too strict way to say no, that's bogus. We cannot register. We don't have instruments to see the spirit world. So we will say it's likely a fantasy. It's something easily dismissed by many. So in that there are some few interesting things that if you listen to it, you can actually come closer to see how is it possible. Someone can come to me and say, how is it possible you can play music so very well? Well, I can go on forever how this is so natural for me, and someone listening to my story maybe starts to see the puzzle pieces, making the picture more clear, and doing that for your talent. I have some puzzle pieces about hearing about, well, I cannot explain it. Is some stories is like I cannot explain it, but it happens if I see a picture of someone. It's just like it starts to film inside my brain. And sometimes I spoke about it, and someone next to this person would say like, no, how can you say that? That's impossible, because that happened to me, and the picture was the person next to him. So that's kind of some proof or evidence or at least indicium or what you say in English, like the leading information to suspect something could be of interest there. And I hear it's a it's an important topic for a lot of people, and I had some years where my country is broken apart in our culture, and we are flooded with lots of people from other cultures. So I have some experience of the Arab and Muslim world, and they have the word jinn and or genie or jinn, and that can be quite a big question for them. And some of them could discuss in quite like they are almost having a great fear for being possessed or taken over by those things. And I could sense in myself that this is my only, I will try to give the word back to you in a short moment, because the thing I can sense myself is, if there would be something I don't see but would wish to come and possess me, he would be I would be superior. He would wish something from me he could not have. And the knowledge inside myself would tell me I have the absolute power over it. So I can rest assured, as long as I say, this is for me, if you wish it, I understand, you will never get it from me, because it's something you need to control me to get.
Yeah.
Well, it go somewhere else. I will not give it to you. So
Well, and that's the thing is, like, usually a lot of these beings, I talk about them like, gangs, gang violence,
mhm,
because what they do is they send the lower ones, to try to get your attention or give you some information. And usually that
yeah,
information can be pretty accurate, right? This is kind of like how
sure.
they get you kind of hooked.
Yeah,
And
I
then
heard about it.
sometimes, they can move into things, like they can move into objects that we use a lot. They can move into I had this CD player that it was also like a radio, a CD player. Um,
Okay.
Back in 2003, I bought it, and it was like a new one. It played like 5 CDs, so you
Oh
didn't have
yeah,
to change your
yeah.
music.
Those one. Yeah, sure.
So a friend of mine didn't believe me. I said it's possessed. She said, "Well, how do you know it's possessed?" And I said, "Because I can put in 5 CDs. I can put in 5 CDs, and it will only play the one CD that it likes, right? And I can even rearrange the CDs in there,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it will still pick the one that it likes. And then if I don't put the one in there that it likes, then it won't pick any. It'll just keep clicking and go to the next one and click and click and click." And so she didn't believe me, right? And it was brand new. And sure enough, it loved whatever was living in it. Its favorite CD was George Winston Winter. And it's, like this piano music. George Winston does this whole, piano album called Winter. And I
Okay.
swear to God, if that CD was in the 5 selection, even though I'd push 5 to listen to and say, George Winston was the number 3, it would stop number 5 from playing, and then it would move over and click through until it found the CD that it wanted, and it would only play that CD. And over and over and over again. One time we had a whole bunch of beers, and we just messed with the stereo just to see if for hours, for like 5 hours, we just drank beers and smoked weed and just messed with its mind. Put
Mhm.
different CDs in, and then see what it would do, and it would do the same thing all the time. I ended up having to I gave it away to somebody, so because I got really sick and tired of you know only it wanting to play that one album. I just got really kind of burned out on it. But you know they could move in the lower grade ones, and they like to come in gangs. Like they have the more dangerous beings that are kind of more out on the edge, that they don't really come close and in unless there's a little bit of a hold on you, right? And all beings have agendas. This is the one thing that I learned a long time ago, from one of my teachers, was that they need you to, do your job and fulfill your job. So if you're not doing your job, they'll sell you out. you know, they'll tell you something, or, you know, if you do this, then, you know, you'll be able to get this, or you'll be able to do that. And then the next thing you know, you do it, and then all hell breaks loose. And it's because they're trying to get you moving in a direction, because, you know, you're behind on the time frame of, you know, your contractual agreement when you came here. So I don't, you know, the other thing too is like, that I always tell people too, is that the one thing that I believe without a shadow of a doubt is that nobody can really tell me anything that I don't know. And I mean that because everybody has the answer. Before you ever ask the question, you already know what the answer is. But the thing is that we're so good at dismissing it right out the gate that we won't even ask the question to hear what the answer is. We'll go out on this long journey of trying to figure out what the answer is. And if we just sit with whatever our issue is, our problem, question that we have, you know, we ask it in our mind, we ask it, you know, like, the answer will always come, and it will always tell you directly. And that is something that you already have. So you don't really need to go get in bed with a whole bunch of different people or spirits to actually figure out what the answer is. It's just, you have to like listen. Number one, you have to ask the question. So here we come back to that critical thinking. You know, if you can't even ask the question in your mind to whatever is there, the energy field, or if you want to call it God or whatever, you know, the unified field. If you can't even sit and come up with like a question to ask, then you're never going to get the answer. So why not just like work on yourself first, you know, and then you don't have to go out and search for all of these answers. For example, I'm collecting a lot of seeds right now because I know that there's food shortages coming,
Sure.
especially in the United States. I know that there's probably going to be periods that I'm not going to be able to leave the building. The writing is going to be so bad when the food problem hits. People in the United States are not intelligent enough. They cannot think enough to ask questions that, you know, maybe I should prepare for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can't really ask questions to themselves, like, you know, direct questions like, how many months of food should I get? And then, you know, a couple days later, you get the answer of like 6 months. Somebody keeps saying 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. And then you go, oh, maybe I should get 6 months of food, right? So I know that these things are coming because, you know, I ask the questions and I get the answers, right? So I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be in drama, and I don't have to be in trauma because I'm operating in my unified field or the one or whatever else. And I ask the question, you know, some weeks I'm like, okay, do I have enough food stored? Some weeks the answer is like, yes, you're good to go. Some weeks it's like, no, no, there's going to be more chaos. Okay, so then I'll go out, you know what I mean, and I'll get a few more things arranged and get those stockpiled. You know, I even had, when I was trying to decide if I should buy like a third world country water purifier, because I would have to go down to duck poop pond to secure water if we don't have water inside, because there is no water in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to go to the park that has 800,000 geese in it that poop in the water, right? And it's not the best water.
Sure.
So I said, you know, to the unified field, I said, you know, is there a possibility that I may get into a position that I may have to drink that water? And the answer that came back was yes. So I went down and I looked at the water and investigated it. And then I looked online for third world country water purifiers, because the answer was yes. I got the answer. There could potentially be, you know, in the near future where you're going to have to drink that water. Okay, great. Now I can go along and I can solve the problem, right? Because I got the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
maybe something could happen in between where maybe more people wake up and more people start making a decision about how everything's going to go down, and that changes everything, and I don't have to go down there and drink that water. That could happen in my future after, I'm prepared for it, right? But I don't think people like to ask the questions because I think, number one, people don't have the intellectual capacity at this point in time because this is what the human being is developing. So it's easier for them to be told what to do and what to think, right? And the fact that a lot of these beings that people are channeling are not telling people to store food, store water, to think about the basics should be a huge indication that they're really not, working in your favor,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So what happened was that, I asked, should I just be out collecting whatever kind of seeds that I could get? And I'm going to go for the heirlooms, right? So I'm going to go for the oldest trees in the neighborhoods, apples, pears, whatever fruit I can find, because right now it's all the fruit is ready to go, right? So I'm like, last 2 weeks, I sneak up, I knock on people's doors with my mask because I got the message. Because there may not be seeds available in the future. This is what the message was. So should I start getting seeds now? Because then when I get on land, then I can actually start making my own orchard from seeds, right? Because that's what I can do. That's what I can manage. That's the work I can do. That's what I can handle. I'm good at it. I have training, biodynamic farming. I've got it all. So not a big deal. So I put out to the universe, like, I've got 3 different apples from 3 different types of heirloom trees, right? Seeds. Then today I hit up the pear people. There's a whole section in town where they have, for some reason, they all have these old heirloom pear trees, in that little particular area. Pear trees are like, 60, 70 years old um, at these houses. So this morning I got up, I went over there, knocked. They're not even eating the pears. They're not even harvesting the pears. They're letting them fall onto the ground and rot. I mean, so they're like, take whatever you want. So I got like huge bags of, heirloom Bartlett pears, which, I'll collect the seeds from. And then in the process of it, last week I started telling the one, the universe, the creator, whatever you want to call it, that, there are some seeds that I'd like to have for orchards, but, I'm not having really any luck finding them. And so today I was at this street and there's a pear vine coming over on the main street. And I saw a lady there, pulling pears off. So I whipped around and parked and I'm like, pulling pears off with her and started talking to her. And her and these elderly people own these 2 houses with all these heirloom fruit trees. And she tells me, oh my God, we have a huge amount of plums. We've got a huge amount of peaches. We got all these things that we have to get rid of. And I said, well, can I come next Friday and I'll help pick it all? And then I'll also get it into mouths of people who could really use it. And then I'll take some for seed collection. And then she said, well, what about all the fruit that's on the ground already? I said, I'll take that. Just put it in a bucket and I'll, glean through it and pull the seeds out of all of it. Just put all the bad fruit, that's rotting, that's bird pecked or whatever. Just throw it all in one bucket. I'll pick up the bucket. I'll have my gloves on. And then I'll pull out all the seeds. I'll wash them real good. I'll dry them and I'll create a storage for them. So here's this woman who's like, so the neighbor ladies are English and they're like in their 90s, so they can't even help with their yard. And so between them, they have like an acre in the backyard and they're just overrun with like all this fruit from old heirloom trees. So now the old ladies are super excited that I'm coming because they found out that I'm involved with Steiner and biodynamic farming. And now they want to talk to me about putting food in the backyard, because they realize things are not good for the near future. So it's like also I'm trading out work, like, here, let me help you put this together and build it, and then I'll take all
Mm,
this fruit,
mm, mm.
right? Which is how things should be. You know what I mean? But
Sure.
I was so blown away because I actually had the double take on the lady when she said, well, when can you, basically come back and help us with all this fruit and glean all the seed and everything from it? And I was like, wow, this is exactly what I asked the universe for,
Okay.
right? And then the universe just says, keep collecting seed. I'll take care of it. I'll
Hmm.
get you to the seed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
sure.
your job to collect it, though.
Hmm.
It's your job to actually do the work to do it. And so the answer, you always have the answer. It's just, I think people lack the capacity to ask the questions.
Well, in my case, actually, I had to grow quite old before I was lucky enough to come to someone that practiced kind of intuitive questions, because most of us will be trained in too much of logic, society structure, and neglecting like feeling questions. Well, ask yourself how the ask yourself a question and feel how the answer is, and that is, many of us will be encouraged to never do that. So that
Well,
could
but
be
now
a
it's like,
good start
right, but
to.
I mean, going past that, how you ask a question and what does it feel like, go past that to waiting for the actual verbal confirmation and the answer, right? So go past that feeling point and your own crap so that the question can really be answered in an honest way.
Sure.
So,
I've
well,
actually.
I'll just tell you a story real quick.
Okay.
I was going through a really horrible period. Um, I was being attacked from all kinds of different directions, energetically, the system. There are just so many crazy things going on, and I wasn't sleeping. I was just totally sketched out, just because it was tough. It was a really, really tough period. So I was at this park, and it was like, I think it was kind of in the fall. It was getting cooler, and I had my dog, and we were at the park. This was like, I don't know. This is probably like 9 years ago,
Hmm.
and I just kind of sat down, and I just, was emotional. I was crying. I was just hysterical. I mean, there was like no one I could really turn to talk about all the things that were going on, because they wouldn't have been able to even, number one, understand it. And they couldn't have helped me anyway. And it would have just scared them. It would have just terrified them. So I'm trying to deal with all this emotional stuff. And I'm just really trying to figure out, how I could move forward, what I need to do, all of these different things. And there was this one question that I asked, in my mind, is like, you know, am I going to end up getting killed? What's going to happen from what's going on? What are these people actually going to murder me? Um, and and then it was just kind of like, it's a horrible question to ask, because it's like, am I going to get murdered? Are these, cabal people going to end up murdering me? Is what's going to happen? Is this because they murdered my business partner? Is this what they're going to do to me? And on top of not getting sleep, they're just running me through the gamut, and I'm just exhausted and tired, and I have zero coping skills. And I remember just bawling my head off asking that question, like, that's, I wonder if, people that know they're going to die sit down and ask that question. And I remember some of my native teachers that, say that traditionally that's kind of a question you would ask, in the morning. The Aborigines are really known for this. They wake up in the morning and they say, okay, is today the day that I'm going to die? And they wait for the answer. And if it's no, then they get on with their day. Right? If the answer is yes, then they lay down and they just prepare for death, right? Wherever they're at, and that's just how simple it is. So I was thinking about all this stuff, and then, my own emotional stuff gets in the mix, and like, well, I'm not ready to die. Like, I don't really feel like I've fulfilled anything. Like, I don't
Hmm.
know what to do. What are the answers? I mean, like, what do I do? I don't even know what to do. Anyway, it started to get dark, so It was getting chilly, so we got back in my van. And during this time frame, we were kind of living on a side street in my van. So, it's good to get there and parked and turn off all your
Sure.
lights and be quiet so that you don't
Hmm.
have, the police or people noticing that you're there. So we get in the van, I'm driving, I hit the light. There's like, I don't know, it's still light out.
Hmm.
There are like 5 cars in front of me at the light. I'm behind them, headed in like this direction. And all of a sudden, I look and there's this guy and he's knocking on my door. And I didn't really get a good look at him. I
Hmm.
just noticed that he was holding my wallet.
Oh.
And in that moment, I realized I had I have a zipper wallet, a wallet that has a zipper that goes all the way
Sure.
around. It was like that. I
Sure.
realized I had left it on the bumper.
Yeah.
But this is the thing, is that guy wasn't at the park. So how could he have seen my wallet on the bumper and he followed me 5 blocks? And why didn't the wallet fall off the bumper? And how did he see it on the bumper? Right? So he knocks on the window with my wallet. He's like, your wallet, your wallet. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I rolled down the window. I'm like, thank you. And I didn't really get a good look at him. And then I drove off. And the next morning I realized that was my answer, that somebody is protecting me. And they showed themselves, right? Somebody is following me around, knows exactly what's going on, knows that I was going to leave my wallet on the bumper, and they were there to not only make sure that things were worse for me because I lost my wallet, but that to notify me that, don't worry, we're watching. And even when you're losing it and you can't figure it out because of what you're going through, we're taking care of you. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to get a mansion on the hill. Doesn't mean that, I'm going to get a job. Doesn't mean any of that stuff. They're
You
just
have to
there.
ask first. You have to ask first. Can I get the mansion on the hill?
Yeah. Well,
Maybe.
yeah. Maybe like, a big piece of land to grow food on would be like what I really want. And we've been working on that. But the thing is that the answer, if you can ask the tough questions, the answer will show itself. Right? And so there's no need to go looking, and there's no need to go listening to all these, spiritual being people channeling stuff. And there's no sense in it. We have to live a physical life. It's part of the human development. And the further that we get away from that, the further we get away from Earth and our responsibility to feed ourselves and live sustainably and help the planet, right? It is going to make our lives harder.
Sure.
And so no amount of voodoo doo-doo is going to save you from the responsibility of you needing to live a sustainable lifestyle on the planet, natural law. And it's good because I have a lot of friends now, not a lot, but quite a few people now that are starting to really gather that, because they started dipping themselves in common law and all this other stuff. And I've just been talking to them over the years, and now it's funny because now they're like, yeah, we really need to go to natural law, because they're actually starting to understand that nature already can teach us how to organize. It already organizes itself. It already works as a community, right? It already can. I mean, you think about a tree. It just blows me away about a tree. Trees have to be like some of the most spiritual things on this earth, because they live in ceremony, right? They're constantly, all the water leaves them in the sap, and they go to sleep like we should. There should be a
Hmm.
period where we rest, right? We just rest. Then what happens is now they start to sprout leaves. These are not the same leaves that they had last year, and
Sure.
nor were they the leaves that they'll have in the future, in the next year. These are unique leaves based on aptogens, because they're trying to adapt constantly to the environment. So these are new leaves that the system of the tree, the computer hard drive, has decided that these are the best possible leaves for this year, right? Like the leaf could be a little bit thinner. It could be a little bit smaller. Maybe this year, because the tree feels like there's not that much light, it's not much light coming from the sun, they may grow the same kind of leaf, but a bigger one, because they need to take in the same amount of light. Trees do this. Plants do this.
Sure.
So why do we need to like go run around? You had something just fly across your. Anyway, I just watched it go. Phew.
Now you will make my spook feeling here, so I will like.
I don't think it's a bad thing, but it could be.
I will just focus in, because
well, you're
if
the one that
gives
your
me
dad
this
is.
feeling, I will have the chills on the back. But when I focus, sometimes I could be like, if I find the confidence, I can really sleep like in comfort and know I'm safe. I can feel safe around here, or it's like a known environment, and I will be like in comfort and relaxed. But if the spook feeling, and the only time I really could confirm the spook feeling, I had a job, and for some reason I stayed longer in the nights and was working. Now I was going down, it was an old hospice, and I was going down an old stairways down, and outside the principal's door I got the creeps. But some weeks later it turned out I didn't get the job, totally honest. So there became a conflict over the legitimacy over my, well, I didn't have my teacher's graduate diploma. So I was educated teacher, but not with the diploma. So she felt like, no, it was time to get me sacked from the job. So there arose a dispute over it, and probably what I felt was like the psychic connection to, this was a female boss, but she had like a firm, strong, I don't know if it was psychopathic or something, but so after I lost the job and everything became like a little circus, and I was part of the reason for it, but I could do a good job. Nevertheless, I afterwards could like, well, the creeping feeling of going past the principal's office there, that was the connection, kind of. There is a possibility of psychic connections, and to collect it up yourself. I am an instrument for energetic beings.
The other thing too is
I'm not tuned in
the conflict already.
Sure.
So that was an answer. So, but a lot of people would
sorts of, and let me connect to, actually the first time I started to hear about this is probably maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, and there is a therapist. She was very skillful in she made the Korean. It's from the word hand. It's Shuyuk. She was, but she called herself an intuitive therapist, alternative therapist. But her physiotherapy, but in it she would incorporate to speak, or sometimes, and she would say like, well, we will test if this is the supplement you should have. We have 2 bottles, there is nothing on it, but in one of the bottles will be of 2 different things. You don't know which is one. Take it in your hand and ask yourself if this is the right one for you. If it's the right one for you, the feeling will be like it will pull towards you. If it's not the right one, it will pull away from you. So that's my first invitation to practice like the art of question. And that's like, later now in the years, I realize I will benefit from develop my rights or intuitive side, or like all these things. I'm musical. I love to play music. So obviously there should be no wrong with my right brain hemisphere in that category. So, well, but in the emotional science or blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to offer myself to practice my right brain capacities. So I started to make some questions, and I had to make the questions out loud, and I put the different answers in some position I could like try to feel it. And I am approaching a little bit more of like a tuning fork for things like it. So I'm open for it, but I feel like not really gifted in the area. So I'm happy to learn or to study or to this and that, but I will not be like the master. But there will be others that can take the role of being very, very proficient in this field, sort of. I didn't hear you. Your microphone is muted.
Yeah,
Now.
so I mean, it comes down to, being able to think. This work that I did, the Steiner work this winter, really kind of brought home that, for example, you could go to any healer or take any kind of supplement or medicine or whatever else it's going to be, or go to some, spiritual guru for whatever it is that you need to be saved from something, basically, is what's happening. But none of it's going to help you, because you can't ask the basic question to yourself. For example, do I want to live?
That I don't need to ask that question. I already know it. That's a funny thing.
Sometimes when people have cancer and they're dying, that's not a question that they think about, because they don't have the ability to think. They're just emotionally reacting to what's wrong with their body and the outside stimuli that goes along with it, right? So there is no actual thinking that's going on. So
well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you a short one, because when I was young, very young, like 4, 5, 6 years, I just felt, I had a strong feeling inside me, I will become old. And I just felt I know it. And it finished. It never bothered me anymore. And by the way, this is the day my dad passed 4 years ago, and I have a picture of him down here. Maybe he's coming for a visit and spending time with me. So
I think so. I think he's zooming around.
I invite him to do that.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Then you're thinking, right? Because now you're like actually inviting instead of not thinking. But so a lot of it goes back to our capacity to think to get the answer. We always will get the answer. We just have to ask the question.
Sure.
And I think that people don't sometimes want to know the answer, because I think a lot of people are just caught up in emotional reaction, and that's all that they feed off of. Because you see it all the time. You see people go through the same stupid thing over and over again.
Let me take a personal take on that again, because in my case, I can bring you a short story. In my case, and maybe in many people in our society, is we are encouraged to have the ideal picture and only display the ideal. So in my take, I would over intellectualize things, and I would carry the question inside me instead of bring it out if it would concern someone. So I learned a lot from, maybe I would think 2, 3 months, and then I would actually go and say to the person, this is what I want. The magic 1 week later, I had switched 100% the wish to change it, because when I actually went to the person concerned, life would teach me, okay, you ask for this, here it comes. And then it helped me to the real process instead of the ideal thinking, this intellectual game, like, because you will try to put the pieces and parts and the zigzag between them, you will try to control it. No, you're not alone in life. Life is the strong teacher. If you miss the lesson will come back to you. So that thing was kind of, for me, very good to meet. It's like we need more courage to really ask the important questions and bring it to the place where it matters. So I learned from that.
Yeah, when you ask the right questions and you get the answers, then you don't have to keep going through the same life lesson over and over again. I mean,
Exactly.
because like, what is I love that quote by Albert Einstein. The definition of insanity:
Sure.
you keep doing, not thinking. You keep doing the same thing over and over again, and then you expect a different result.
Sure.
And that's not thinking, because if you were thinking, then you wouldn't go through it. And I look at a lot of, I don't really know if, I have a really good friend of mine who's Swedish. She's a Swedish woman. But she's a very powerful woman, and she doesn't put up with a lot of crud. And she's got a really good education, and she makes really good money in the U.S. And she's just a go-getter, man. She'll go take care of it. She'll go get it. Unlike women in America, women in America are like, ugh, I really wish that they could see themselves, because a lot of them, just the first thing that they seek out is a relationship, and everything's about that. They'll even get in debt to buy clothing and all these things to like bait a guy in. There's even a famous comedian, Chris Rock, and he talks about that. He said, women are so fake, right? They got their fake boobs, they got their fake hair, they get their fake eyelashes. It's like all of this is kind of like, baiting. It's like baiting men, because they don't really think, is this what I want? And I took a totally different attitude, because I had a dad that raised me that was like, don't get married young, don't have kids until like you have an education, try to travel, get all this stuff done before you get settled, because you'll never do any of it. Right? It'll be game over. So I never really got married, and I never had kids, because I'm still doing what I want to do. I'm still going to school. I'm still exploring. I'm still creating. I'm still experiencing. Where a lot of my friends have really just settled with people, and some of them have been through like 3 marriages and have kids that are dragged through each one of them. And it shocks me, because they don't think about things at all. Like one of them, I said, if you like could, actually think, like, should I get married for a second time? I mean, would you have even listened to the answer, instead of just trying to fit in or pretend or be what society, like has trained you to do and be? And so, a lot of this thinking, is difficult, because it will lead you in a direction out of the herd, and you'll probably even get rocks thrown at you. You'll get chased out of Dodge and out of town, because thinking is really not allowed. Like I have a friend of mine who keeps going back to the same guy who is a sociopath. And it's like, I keep asking her, like, what drives you to go back to him? Well, he won't give me money unless we're together for the son. And, he's always this, or he's always that, or, like, my quality of life is not as good. And those are like feelings, right? Those are not answers to your questions. Those are just, emotional reactions to the stimuli from the outside world, and other people's emotional programming about what you should be doing, right? And so then, the big one she always goes back to is that, well, um, our son shouldn't have to be without a father. Well, you should have thought about that before you married somebody who's a sociopath, who has even threatened to take you out in the desert and kill you. What in your right mind would you actually stay with somebody? Why would you even allow your son to go spend time with somebody who actually has said these kinds of things to you and has been completely violent to you? And the threat could actually happen. And what if he does try to harm you in a way, and now you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your life? You can't blame him at that point, because you made the decisions, whether you were conscious of it or not. You could have completely chosen something else, but you didn't even ask the question.
Sure.
Why should I be with this person? Why would anyone want to endure this? Why am I choosing to endure this? What belief systems do I have that are keeping me from using my brain and my capacity to actually think? You know, there's a lot of questions that you could ask yourself instead of trying to run off to, you know, your psychic and get the answers and all this other stuff. You know, your creator that is helping you, that's part of you, that's in the right hemisphere, that's the God brain. That means that part of you is infinite, it's omnipresent, but you don't even go there to access that brain because you don't even ask the questions that can be answered.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you think about this, like all these people believe in the law of attraction.
Sure.
But think about this, if you can't think, which means that you can't actually make, you know, the right decisions, what do you think you're going to get more of? You're going to get more of the stuff that has led you into the situations that have made you unhappy and miserable, because you're going to continue that cycle over and over again. If you were to like stop and think, maybe I don't want to be in this relationship anymore.
Or be careful.
Or what would I do if I wasn't in this relationship? And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, you get an opportunity to move, you know, somewhere else and attend a school that you've been wanting to attend, because there's the answer. So it's been provided for you. But if you never ask the question, the universe or whatever, the creator, is never going to be able to give you the answer. And because you don't ask the question, and you're just going by knee-jerk reactions, your gut reaction, and you just stay in this like rat on this wheel over and over and over again until you die. That's the part that blows me away.
At times it could be wise to be careful what you ask for, because maybe you will get it.
Well, the problem is that nobody asks for it. That's the thing, is most people don't ask for it. And so they just get what they don't want.
Yeah, and do you really want something? Did you think it through?
Well, yeah, because a lot of people don't. They just, I mean, you know, like for example, I had back when I was studying with this Lakota Sioux medicine woman when I was 23, one of the gentlemen, he was a college professor at Gonzaga University up in Washington. And on the side, he was like a really heavy spiritualist. He had kind of two sides to him. Periodically, we'd go and have beers and just, you know, talk, because he was just so unbelievably smart. And he was, you know, he was much older than me. So he was more like a mentor. And I remember one time he said to me, you know, you got fairy tale syndrome. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you know, you just, what? You meet somebody that looks good or whatever, and then what, you just get on the horse and ride off into the sunset? Did you ever ask yourself what's on the other side of the sunset? Maybe it's worse than your life now. Maybe, like, you know, they put you in a prison. Maybe they don't feed you, they starve you. Maybe like you become like some kind of slave, you know. And he said because of this, you know, fairy tale application download into American society, people just automatically assume that if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. And he said, but that's not true. And so people don't actually think. And it really led me to think, because I realized I kind of do have this, you know, fairy tale type syndrome of like something will just kind of magically happen, or somebody will just magically save me and it's going to be okay, and that I don't have to do my own work in my own life. And I started to realize, like, it's this savior mindset that keeps us from thinking. And maybe we're our own savior. We just don't know it, but because we can't actually intellectually think, we're always waiting for somebody else to actually fix it, make it good, while we stay angry, while we stay irritated, while we stay, you know, in whatever situation that we're in whatever cycle, till, you know, we die.
We should be closer to natural instinct. If I would just take some small parts of my own biology education, I have university studies among others, but life taught me more. And any domesticated animal has less brain matter, has less survival critical talent. A dog compared to a wolf, throw the dog out in nature and throw a wolf out in nature, the wolf will easier survive for real, the real challenge of being alone. So and the topic for today is like this spiritual or this challenging
Well, yeah.
channeling.
So the whole thing is like we're a domesticated animal.
So that's my point, because in some sense, and I could make a story, because the channeling subject, I tend to try to find better sources of intelligence or information. But so I wish to, like, well, test some of these, and I stumbled upon someone, and I started to listen to the presentations, but I decided to use a tool of reverse the sound to see the subconscious messages arriving, and in doing so, she claims she does not channel. She claims this and that, and she claims double information at times. That's conflicting. If she says she goes to left and she goes to right, like, well, what did you say? Left or right? But it was in some topics I could find conflicting information from her. But in the reverse speech, when she was talking about your species, like humanity, in reverse came the word sheep. So that was kind of both amusing and an interesting, yes, I will an interesting observation. Like,
well, and
it happened more than one time. And also she talked a lot about form or forming, but actually when you listen to some sounds backwards, form is intelligently crafted word, because it will be morph. It will be invited to be morph in reverse speech, and your brain will actually pick up reverse communication, and you will be skilled to detect intuitively the message. Is this genuine or not? And some say in research they discover a baby developing her the capacity of language. The first thing they practice is, when we listen to Gaga Gaga, they actually also before forward speech practice reverse speech. So a baby actually can speak in reverse but forward, as we would have to practice to speak reverse.
Yeah, but we talked about that too. About, I forget what her name was. Kane is her last name, but I started following her like in the 90s, and she was she was a paranormal investigator, and so she would started talking into some beings, or through EVP sound recordings. So she would ask them questions, and it's pretty creepy, because a friend of mine, this was in 2010, she called me because she was hardcore into a lot of the spiritual stuff. I mean, I could say that I was raised hardcore in it. I don't consider myself hardcore, but probably am a lot more hardcore than most people. But she was super hardcore, and so she said this lady had called her. So if I would go with her over to this lady's house, and she had a studio, and she would use white noise, and then she would ask spirits questions, and then it would be recorded, and then you play back the recording, and then you hear what they are talking about. But we were freaked out, because what happened was that she mostly talked to her dead husband, who hated her. So when we went over there, she turned on the sound noise machine. We're all quiet. She's asking questions, EVP like type questions, blah, blah, blah. And then we're just sitting there, we don't hear answers from the spirit world. We just hear a lot of her questions that she's asking. It goes on like 30 minutes. Then she turns everything off, and then she has this, starts, playing back the recording, and you can hear her say, you know, like, hey, spirits out there, hey, you know, husband, blah, blah. Well, we didn't realize he'd been dead like 20 years. No wonder he hated her because, you know, she kept bringing him back and he didn't, you know, he wanted to like, you know, like move on. And he was just like imprisoned by her constantly trying to talk to him. But anyway, we were shocked because on the recording, the spirits were calling her, you know, a effing BICTH, you effing C word. And those were his answers. She would say, well, how is everything going up there? And then the playback would be like, you effing, you know, blah, 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 blah. And we were just like, oh my God. You know, it was the first time we realized like spirits could be really, really nasty. But anyway, you know, working with some of this, her Kane's work, and what she was finding was that she would, you know, get things on the EVP from paranormal stuff she was investigating, but then she started actually talking to these spirits and on the EVP recorder, and they would say really nice things about, you know, really enlightened things about the universe and all of this other stuff, and really spectacular and dazzling and beautiful and enlightened. And then so she was like, wow, you know, like I'm really talking to some people, I'm recording it, I got the records. And then one day by accident she played it in reverse, and then she heard, you know, those stupid humans, you know, we'll eventually slaughter and rape them all. You know, they have no idea that we harvest their souls. Hell is in our world. You know, everyone that dies comes to our world. You know, we give them exactly what they want, and a delusion, illusion. They're so stupid and ignorant. And she was like shocked because she thought, wow, this could be like an anomaly. And then she started playing back all of the EVP records, and she realized like that they were really awful spirits, and they were liars, and they were psychotic. And then she started actually getting spirits who had died here, and that spirit had been trafficked by these beings who were more reptilian.
Oh.
And they would come through the EVP saying, you know, we're trapped over here. We can't get any help for people to help us get out of here. Even our spirits are being trafficked, you know, like all this stuff. And so over 20 years, and everybody was like really negative to her. Once she started, she was one of the first YouTube people, like some of her stuff started going up on YouTube, and she's trying to warn people about a lot of this stuff. She ended up like just shutting down her website, shutting down her YouTube channel, because people just didn't want to think. They want to believe that there's something else out there that actually likes us, and that
Well,
we're not, and that we're not, that we're somehow more superior than cattle in the field grazing, when we're domesticated animals. There are other human-y people who eat us, right? So there are other species that actually eat us. And as far as one of the things Steiner said was that we have such like bad karma that all of the animals that are on the planet, all they are doing is basically trying to help balance out all of our negative karma, the humans. They eat up the karma. The birds take in the mental karma, and then he said when they die, they finally are released from that. But, you know, all of these animals, if we're so far superior at this point in time, I'm not saying we can't get there with human evolution. Steiner says eventually we'll get there. But we have all these animals that are actually taking on our karmic footprint because we're disgusting. And what we're doing on the planet is totally disgusting. So what kind of enlightened being do you think would actually want to talk to us? I mean, do we like to talk? Do we even try to talk to rats that we put through scientific studies and we starve them, we give them tumors? Sure. And so people, you know, think about all the people who have been abducted by ETs and had crazy scientific experiments done to them. In some cases had organs removed, given viruses, you know, all kinds of different things. And so people have to kind of like wake up to the fact that we give our consciousness away, we give our thoughts away, we give our ability to think away to everything that's outside of us, we're going to be used. And these beings don't really care, spirits and beings, they don't really care about us at all. I mean, like you were saying, you know, you played it in reverse and the word was sheep. That's the
Well,
truth.
yes. Let me try to. Well, I lost my train of thought, but in real, Patrick Jordan, he has the site vaccinefraud.com, and Dennis Fatcho and Patrick Jordan. Dennis Fatcho has a show himself, Inside the Eye Life. He will say, like, there is an anti-life force, and seemingly it is performed and executed by something we will associate as humans, but if you really examine the fruit of their labor, actually they would be more like a anti-life. They are like in biological suits like we are. So on Earth, there actually it seems to be beings fulfilling an agenda, and in the so-called secret societies, that's also kind of a running theme. Some secret societies will say, like, well, we take orders from, and then the traces on Earth disappear, and it seems to be like, as you say, these entities. And if these malicious entities actually is running some, because these channeling things was very high on the fashion for many of the elite societies or elite clubs in many so-called sophisticated countries. Now, Patrick Jordan, he has an even more interesting but acutely radical notion, because in biology, and I know maybe some will discuss it, but virus, according to biology definitions, do not reproduce from their own system. They will be reproduced from the mechanism of a living organism. So in biology, life, the step of life goes down to the level of bacteria. After that, the smaller units, viruses, will be called, like, well, not living organisms. And Patrick Jordan would say, like, that's like anti-life. And it seems because in lots of parasitic life forms, one of the first steps is a virus in association with small microorganisms that later will be almost like a layer over. A microorganism will penetrate the brain of a rat and change the rat behavior from being afraid of a cat to become sexually aroused of cat urine, thus coming closer in grips of a cat very easily. But this virus and parasite combination will go on into the cat brain, and anyone having cats at home will risk to get this parasite inside himself if the cat feces is more than 24 hours in the litter box at home. So cat owners there will be a behavioral change in humans as well. And some scientists actually made an investigation of high risk accidents for insurance companies. They made, like, for example, a motorbike high-speed accident, and the death occurred as a result of the accident. They went in and found an overrepresentation of this parasite in the brain of those persons. So the change of behavior also can come from, seemingly, at least as the biologists will study it, from the so-called anti-life structure, viruses, and their main behavior is to totally change behavior, and to make the organism work now, work for the parasites or the anti-life force benefit. Here comes Patrick Jordan's radical notions. He says it has wandered so long, so now it's in the most proposed intelligent men and women working to construct a totally artificial, crazy world that will continue to eat the world like now it's almost dead. And our crazy technology seems to go step and step and step refining this anti-life force agenda to exterminate the beauty of creation around here and the so-called eternal fight of good or evil, or, well, you know, all these stories about
Yeah. Well, the other
Satan
part
and
is
God.
that, yeah, so because of the anti, whatever it is, whatever level that it is, we're
Mhm.
constantly also fighting against it, which makes it even, worse. But there's a couple quotes, or there's a quote, and then there's a little bit of a paragraph that I want to read, because these come from people of native knowledge and
Yeah, great,
shamanism, right?
great.
So one of them is from a guy named Don Juan Matus, who Carlo Castaneda wrote books about, who he studied with. And so this is an actual quote from Don Juan Matus. Don Juan Matus didn't like this world. He worked very hard spiritually to be able to take his body and leave this world and create a world adjacent to this one, because he said this one was just kind of really horrible. It's a really horrible place. And it couldn't be, they didn't really feel that it could be overcome, at least during, their time frame. So it basically says, in order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous manner. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, a horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them. So mostly everything that we believe, even with spirits and channeling and all this other stuff, it's has a lot to do with that it's already been prepared. This is a really killer paragraph. This is like one of my, whenever I get stuck in my thinking, this is one of my favorite paragraphs. It says, we have to understand here that the true negative realm agenda is to eat consciousness. So this actually prevents an overt overtake in literal physical terms. If an invasion was detected, this would mean that the veil would be lifted and all would see the man behind the curtain and would be disgusted and turn away. Just as in The Wizard of Oz, those ruby red slippers have to be obtained very carefully. Gathering the essence in the art of great subtlety, the negative alien plan is in its purest sense stalking. The aim of stalking is to create a completely controlled artificial environment composed of thoroughly predictive human behaviors, made predictable because they have been programmed to respond to cues of conditioning. For centuries, these programming signals have been being set up either because of time travel capacities and capabilities, or because the actual historical presence. Various prophets or religious leaders have been influenced to preach or to teach or prophesy philosophies designed to lay a foundation for the later overtake, possibly in our present time. A lot of people think that the alien invasion scenario is a ruse concocted by the government to create the impression that there is a forming threat, thereby enabling the institution of the New World Order. But these ideas based on the misrepresentation of the process just described. The important thing to remember is this: there is not a unified conspiratorial activity going on here in the hierarchy of the government. The divide and conquer effect is also manifest at this level and suits the aliens' purpose to a T. Such activity at all levels is consistent with their program of stalking in which confusion and cross-purpose prevents a clear perception of the part of the stockees. Yet at some deep level, there may be a direct conspiratorial interaction between the secret government and the negative aliens, but it is unlikely that any name of those involved would be recognized by anybody. And no matter how in the know regarding this subject, these secret superiors are just that, secret. Any organization you can name or about which you are aware are merely outer circles. What is designed objective of this stalking, because stalking is a very shamanism practice. The effect of stalking is sort of like stampeding a herd of cattle bit by bit. They are consolidating into the negative mode, which consists of the idea of us versus them. Even though on the surface it may seem that this mode is positive or in service to others, i.e. save the world because it's wrong or flawed or blighted with original sin or whatever, the very fact that it is formed in the dominator mode of perceiving salvation outside means that it can be more easily be taken over, body, mind, and soul, at the level that is unseen and unseeable. In other words, Satan can be the most often does appear as an angel of light. It is in this way that we find our way out of the trap. It isn't easy, but it is a way. The primary objective of negative stalking is to persuade through strongly The primary objective of negative stalking is to persuade through strongly influenced, but not robotic, behavioral patterns, the free choice of the targeted consciousness to align with the negative higher density existence. Now, one more time, the free choice of the targeted consciousness to align with the negative higher density existence, because in the long run, the object is the eating of the function of units of consciousness by the negative hierarchy. The free will intact, it is not good food otherwise. And that is by a guy named Michael Topper.
Yeah, before I was thinking about some will say it is important for us how we conduct our inside thinking world or spiritual world, because our spiritual energy is actually food for the spirits being in other dimensions above us. So
but our physical body is also food. You know, that's the thing, is like people think that we're anything different than a herd animal, or that we're different on this planet than an animal. And you know, if we look at like attracts like, right? What do we do to animals? What do our scientists do to animals? So what can we expect the law of attraction is going to do to us? The same thing, right? Because like attracts like. So when we're actually taking animals and taking their skulls off and, you know, connecting whatever hard drives to their brain and injecting them with all kinds of stuff, what do you think other beings are doing to us? Because in the law of attraction, we're also enabling them to do this to us because we do it to other species. So the thing is like people don't really get, the other thing is like people don't really get what the law of attraction is. Like, and so if you want to believe in it, you have to like decide, you know, if we perpetuate this behavior, which is, this is how we're treating animals, then we're going to be treated like animals by another species, and probably one that's smarter than we are. So that's the law of attraction in a nutshell, because what is above is below. What is below is above.
Yeah. But the seemingly, if some negative out there other place entity drives imbeciles to take the wrong road, maybe this light gate, and the souls is entrapped, their obviously should be, and now I will try to give you the question as more spiritual guided or intelligent than me. There should obviously be almost like a higher self, or myself in there would be a more better caretaker of my spiritual and bodily energies. There should be another road that will not entrap the soul, right? That could be like another dimension out there after here, or what?
Well, but I mean,
You see where I go?
that's what ancient shamans were doing, was they
Or
were reaching.
is Buddha the same? Because he will like the enlightenment. What I hear just peripherally is like he doesn't want to incarnate here again. He wants to go to forever, never again be incarnated here. Go to the right home or place. Some will name
Right.
it center of
But
the galaxy.
think about how much actually spiritual work that takes. I mean, even a lot of
Now I leave it back
a
to you.
little,
Listen.
yeah, even a lot of shamanism, you know, work that I've studied, like one of the main things that my focus is, which there's just too much damn shit in this world, like, keeping a roof over your head and all this other stuff, that you actually can't get these practices done, because it requires 100% of your life and 100% of your time. It's another reason that I didn't get married or have kids, because I couldn't actually unadhere myself from this system at some point in time, because I don't have enough time to do all of it, right? There has to be like a focus. So, um, but, like, for example, I think really there's South American shaman practices that are still pretty radically profound. I've been lucky enough to actually have teachers and people in those nodes to kind of teach me things. Also, I think like with more older Tibetan Buddhism, I mean, you think about this, like, for example, these people, the older ones that were living in Tibet, the reason why they had all these caves all over was
Mummies.
because they had monks living in them that would actually leave their bodies. And then their bodies would become mummified for a period of time, but then they would come back into the body and the body would rehydrate. So they would actually list this in long volumes of information. And then, in 20 years, once a year, they might send out an attendant to go there and just see if anything's moved outside of the door of the cave, because they weren't allowed to actually go in, because it would alter it in a way where they couldn't get back into their mummified body and rehydrate it. But they would like bring food and water and whatever else and leave it outside of the door. And then, in a few days, they'd come back if it had been touched. Otherwise, they knew that they
Oh,
hadn't
that's
come
interesting.
back. And so they had to have places where they weren't going to be disturbed for long periods of time. And there was an article, actually, this was a couple of years ago, that actually made it out into the mainstream news, where there was like a huge uproar with the
Yeah.
lamas and the monks, because the Chinese had removed one of these highly evolved beings' mummified body out of one of these caves, and we're actually, had it in a lab, and we're taking tissue samples from it.
Mhm.
And they found out like it had been mummified for like 200 years. And the lamas um, and the monks were like, well, yeah, I mean, sometimes we've had, some of them be gone for 1,500 years and come back into the body and rehydrate. So this whole thing of I mean, I think that some of these Egyptian mummies,
Mhm.
I think there's a potential for them to be able to come back at some point in time. Uh, you know, us being able to take our bodies and go through a doorway into, another side dimension. There's a lot of
Sure.
writings that you
Mhm.
can find in books where some of these beings that are like, they're human, 10,000 years old, and they, were so good at these practices that they actually went through a timeline and then created like their own whole cities, because they
Mhm.
were bored living in them, because they didn't really want to be here. And periodically they'll pop back in and go out. So this is not new news, but the bottom line is that my total 100% personal belief is that if you don't leave that way, right? So when I think about community, what I'd like to do is find some other, highly evolved shamans that I could actually leave with to create another world, and then just not have the aging on my body or anything else like that. Because I don't think, even knowing everything that I know and having the practices, I don't think that I will make it out of what I call the heaven experiencing looping cycle. And that is, they capture you because, people are
How?
like the light. And it's the same as a tractor beam of people being abducted.
Yeah.
The story is exactly the same. You get into the light, you can't get out the light, but then they conjure things in your mind to keep you going with them willingly. You've got
Yeah.
these spiritual councils,
Did,
you have
did
your
you see?
mother.
Did you see the Trek New Generation episode
Mm-mm.
about it, depicting
No,
this drama?
no. But
I should collect it for you and send it a clip,
yeah,
because
that would be great. But
there's
the
an
thing,
episode where the captain goes into a critical situation, and they make a drama in the episode about it, like they cut down to a seemingly starship, and she's there talking to this entity that tries to force her to accept, to follow through a gate of light.
yeah. Yeah, so
So
I mean so I call it the heaven experience, and what they do is once they get you through it, then they kind of shock you, they put you in an electronic prison cell, and then they incarnate you back in. And then you don't remember your past lives. I mean, sometimes some of it kind of bleeds through, and but for the most part not. So you're not
how do you
incarnating.
go how do you go somewhere else? How do you escape the trap?
Well, you have to have a strong energy practice, which means that you have to do practices, and you have to be able to sustain. You have to be able to generate enough power in your energy field to basically do it. And most of us weren't born with enough energy, right? Because our mothers didn't have enough energy. So part of in shamanism, there's like three kind of energy things. One is that you have the energy that you're born with, but because most people have nutritional deficiencies, they have emotional problems, generational genocide, a lot of these other things, the mother doesn't pass on very much energy to the child. So that's what you have. And then this world basically punctures holes in your energy field with all the experiences, and what energy you do have bleeds out. And then other people actually feed off your energy field that people that intimidate you, try to manipulate you, try to control you. These people, regardless if they understand what they're doing, they're actually pulling in that energy into their
Hmm.
field.
Hmm.
So then there's practices of reclaiming the energies that you lost, which can be, you could spend, 10, 20, 30 years and just recover a little bit of it. And then there's the practices where you start to generate power into your energy field through using different kinds of physical. A lot of them are physical practices. A lot of them are practices where you just don't function with the system anymore because, if you do, the system is puncturing holes and leaking your energy out. So when I work with people energetically, I look at what their energy field is doing, and our energy field on the very outside is like a saran wrap. And most people have leaked out so much energy out of their bodies that they get to a point in health where their actually field is suffocating them. The saran wrap edge of their energy body, it's lost so much energy that it's now saran wrapping around them. And people know when they get to these points because they'll have a lot more anxiety, they'll have panic attacks, they'll feel like, they can't breathe. Well, you can't, because people don't die in the system. The illusion is that we die of health problems, right? Cancer
Yeah.
or whatever else. But the truth is we die because there is no more energy left in the energy body to run the computer system called the body. And that's why we die. So, I take a look at that. And most people, I mean, you have little kids right now that are being born that they have no amount of energy in their bodies, and then the birth trauma takes out the last that they have, and then they get cancers right away and all these other health problems because they
vaccines.
but they don't have enough energy to start off with
Sure.
to run their body systems. Then what happens is everything on top of that, basically kills them, because what they need is the energy source. So one of the things I used to do was that when I was dealing with people that had terminal illness, I would do what is called a fill, and I would fill up their energy field so that they had enough energy to actually work on a better diet. They could actually, think, because otherwise they're so sick and so lack of energy that they can't even get off the ground. So you're just going to die because you're a wounded animal. And you're just, slowly dying. So, but I know someone, I can't really tell you their name. I've actually,
sure, go on.
Yeah, he just wouldn't be happy, because the problem is that when people know his age, that's all they can focus in on. They can't focus in on the fact that he has sustained physical life and is in the kind of health that he's in at the age that he's at, because of shamanism. So,
and how are you
doing? He's like 115 years old. He practices a type of ancient martial art for 6 hours a day called Loban. He practices 6 hours a day at 115 years old. He can move objects. This is how powerful he is, because of the practices, these shamanism type practices. And a lot of the ancient Chinese arts used to do this kind of stuff. They used to generate power in the body so that you could defy anything in this reality. But they're not taught that way anymore. They're taught to defend instead of to regenerate. So we have a conscious eating everything here. They destroy the true essence of everything, which is to generate power for longevity, to live 700 years, versus everything in it is to kill us and destroy us, right? To get rid of us faster, use us up faster, put us through the system faster.
How are you doing? How do you see your
Well, I mean, I feel better, I think, than I did in my teens.
Do you have hope? Do you build for yourself the hope of going not into the trap? You will go to the better place.
No, I'm not really so sure that I'm going to be able to bypass it.
Because,
and this is the thing, is I work super hard, but I'm just not. I think that, once I move and I'm on land, and then I can actually start really creating a practice that I can do every day, because I'll start to do something, and then all hell breaks loose. You got people knocking on the door, the phone starts ringing, you got people screaming and fighting next door. So these entities rile up things in your environment to actually keep you from moving forward in consciousness.
But you really have to ask the question, will you get the land to come there,
Oh yeah. No, it's on its way.
And the answer came to you?
Yeah. No, I've been working on it for 18 years. Great. So I've got the funding and everything. I'm just waiting. That the funding is not being released because of the economy. So once it all falls apart, then I'll get it, and then I'll be able to go. So I'm just in preparation of that. So I do what I can in nature and working with nature, and that's how I'm, keeping myself kind of mentally together, without overreacting to the system. And that's kind of where my focus is right now. But I definitely one time saw myself at 200 years of age. I was really old, and I was in a bed, and I had no hair on my head, and I had a couple strands. And I asked, is that me? And the voice said, yes. And I said, Jesus Christ, how old am I? And they were like, oh, like around 200. And I was like, God, I look older than that. I look like 1200, you know? It was like, I look God awful. So, you know,
Well,
but the thing is like, all we have to do is we have to just start thinking and asking questions and and not running, you know, not like running to all these other people to try to find the answers, and being really careful about being grounded and being in your life and taking care of what's right in front of you, and doing the step by process. And I have to remind, you know, like I have one student in shamanism that I've had for a long time, and you know he's really frustrated, you know, he's been really frustrated for about a year. And I tell him this world is a very lethargic and slow place. And you have to hold your attention for the same thing for a long time. Because if you lose that attention for 1 second, then it all breaks apart and falls apart. And then you have to actually rebuild it. So I said, you know, you just have to accept that it's a lethargic world, it's slow, and you just have to focus. You have to have enough energy, a good mind, and stay the course every day, because you know you can't really expect your life to be any different than what it is. But in the moment, you can choose what that wants to be. What do I want to be? Every day I want to be with the flowers. Every day I want to be with the food. Every day I want to be with the trees. If I can get to the river, that's what I do. That's my attention. That's what I hold my focus in on. And that, you know, I just want to spend the rest of my life, my physical life, you know, helping the land, healing the soil, growing food. And that's it. That's it. And I think once I kind of got myself unattached from, you know, a crazy life of grandeur and money and marriage and all this other stuff, and just focused in on the simple thing that matters to me, you know, going for a swim in the river, picking medicinal flowers, making medicinal medicines, eating things from the earth, touching things from the earth. It has helped me to stay and hold my attention and not get distracted by all these other things. And it helps me to be able to let go of all the stuff that's going on in my environment that I can't control, and not attach to it, you know, not attached to it so that I'm losing and weakening myself. The more attached I become to it, the more I weaken myself and the more energy I lose. And then I have to work harder to regenerate energy. But like right now, I've got all these paper sacks, you know, with all this fruit I've been harvesting. And that's, I can't wait. I can't wait till it's a little more soft and I can start taking the seeds out of it. And they're like little babies. I talk to the little seeds and I say, oh, you're going to be a beautiful tree someday.
do you know how many days it takes for an apple seed to sprout?
No, but I know that it doesn't produce fruit for 8 years. So it's a long journey. And that's the sad part, is like, I might not, you know, I might not see these trees, you know, be a 50-year-old tree, but
Mm.
maybe somebody, you know, somebody will be blessed by them as, you know, society bottlenecks and food is hard to find. You know, maybe people will come across the land that I develop and be like, wow, whoever did this, you know, created this beautiful utopia for, you know, for us in the future. So, you know, I
Now
can.
I can tell you some secrets. My grandfather was he had an apple orchard and he was farmer. So I studied and learned a little bit. It takes 1 year before the apple seed sprouts. So you have to wait 1 year before it opens up. But apples and well, all fruits, and it's called in our language noble fruits. The seed from one apple variety have one chance in 10,000 to give the same if you make the seed to grow. So they cannot use the actual variety of an apple to take the seeds to get it new again. You have to take the branch from it and put it and glue it together with the root of another seed. And
No, I
this,
did that. I did that with grafting. The
yeah,
problem is that
you have to
whatever.
you have to graft to get the same variety you're looking for, because the seed will extremely likely in 99.999% of the times give a different new variation of the
But
apple.
that's what I want, because
I, but
I want the
that
adaptogen in the, see, the fruit trees and plants have the ability to adapt. It's called an adaptogen.
sure, sure.
And then I want that because I want the seed to adapt to the climate or the environment that it's going to be growing in. But I tried doing a lot of that grafting and I didn't like it because the root mass was a hybrid, usually root mass. So I'm putting an heirloom top on a hybrid tree. What could go wrong with that, you know? So I didn't really
This is the
like,
standard.
yeah, I didn't really like those. And so this time around, I'm actually going to do it from seed. And I want them to be the way that they want to be. And that's why I collected heirloom seeds, because they're from trees that are actually dying too, you know, that are old, nobody takes care of. They're not a hybrid. So these are old trees with old seeds. And I want to take the seeds and I want to see what they want to create, because there's got to be something in that tree that is trying to produce apples for the future, right?
Sure,
So
sure,
those
sure.
seeds have to be adapted more so than that tree that's not doing well in the environment with all the chemtrails and all the Wi-Fi and all this other stuff, you know. So I have to believe that it's creating an offspring that will be far superior to itself, because they have the ability, adaptogens. They adapt. We're not very good at it, but that's why we eat the food, because then we get the adaptogens from the food that's grown. And if we're buying food and eating it, we're not getting it from the food. You know, the only way we can get those adaptogens are from eating food out of our own yard, from our own area, because the plants and the trees know what the climate is, right? They know what's going on. They know what the chemicals are. They know what the toxicities are. And they're already creating things to divert those things. So when we eat those products, it actually boosts our immune system and it puts things into our bodies so that our body's computer system can figure out how to adapt in the current crisis, you know, under the conditions. And that's why you should grow food. That's why you should grow your own food. And that's why you should eat food that you grow, is so that you can be adapting, you know, you can actually, you know, have long-term, you know, health. And, you know, it goes back to like what the native teachers say, you know, all my relations, you know, having relationships with all my relations, including all the plants, but it brings you back to a relationship with the food. And that matters. That matters on so many levels, that you have a relationship to this food that you grew, that's local, that somebody else is growing, that's grown in your environment, to your overall health. So it's funny because, you know, I started out as like, you know, early on in my life with people, teachers, family members that are like way out there spiritually. And I did a lot of that stuff. I spent 10 years with a group of people in my early 20s where every twice a week we would get together and we would energetically go out into the energy grids and we would actually collectively work on trying to change the system energetically. And we would work together, right, to be able to do this. It did nothing. So I always tell people, like, my message is that we need to return back to earth and we need to talk to the soil as a spiritual journey, right? That's our highest spiritual journey, is to return our attention back to the planet, to the water, to the soil, to the food. And that's the highest spiritual expression that we could actually have. And that's why I love Steiner's work, because, you know, that's what he talks about too. Like, what we're doing in this epoch matters for the future generations, and what they're going to have, because, you know, it starts to bottleneck about us. and the populations start to, you know, get constricted. And like I said, he said that he saw in not too long a future that most of the earth would be uninhabitable. And we see that in the United States. We have a whole huge area in the South and the Midwest that was completely flooded, where it's the bread belt of the United States. It's totally screwed. All the animals died. Last year, or the 2018 crops got soaked. All the topsoil got washed away. A lot of these farms, they don't think they'll ever farm there again. And then now we have a dust bowl coming through that area again. Right now, there's been such a serious drought in Ohio that it killed all the corn crops. There is no corn coming to market.
I heard.
So, yeah.
Planned.
So, well, the thing is that, you know, this is why there aren't going to be very many places where you're going to be able to grow food and eat. I mean, and I think in America, people are oblivious to this fact. Like, they keep thinking, you know, like apples come on a truck into a store and you can buy them. Not, you know, how many apple trees did an orchard have to have in order to truck them from Venezuela so that you could buy them. And, you know, like, if you think about it this way, I was on a radio show, and so I put together this whole thing about this cantaloupe, because the cantaloupe that I got at the store was from Honduras. So I looked it up, like, you know, so I buy a $3 cantaloupe from Honduras at the grocery store. It's commercial grade, so it's not organic. So that means that if it came by plane, it was like 3,500 miles to San Diego to be dropped off. If it was trucked up, it would be 5,000 miles. How in the hell could anyone produce a $3 cantaloupe in the United States from another country? So by the time that I did the math on the cantaloupes, which included the farmer not destroying more forest to have better soil, because they have to destroy it as they grow the commercial grade farming and not restore the soil. So they keep tearing down forests to be able to do this. So if the farmer had a good piece of land, he had everything that he needed to make the soil good as he's growing his crops. All the people that worked for them, they were getting a real wage, right? He was paying everybody. He made money. The people made money. He was taking care of the land. It meant that cantaloupe in the U.S. would be $18. So Americans really have to kind of get a grip that we've been stealing food from other countries. We've been stealing oil. We've been stealing all this stuff so that we can have things cheap in the United States. And that's coming to an end. And a lot of people are probably going to die in the United States due to not being able to get food. And it's starting this month. And there's a huge famine in Africa, Syria, because the locusts went through there and ate everything. They ate everything. So you have whole countries that are having a whole famine, right? A massive famine, regardless if it's been generated. We know that it's been generated to happen. But the other thing too is, like, each individual hasn't made a choice to live sustainably with the earth. So of course, you want to be part of the system and you want to have your head in the sand. Well, this is what you get. You get the system that gets to control you and do whatever it wants to you. Because you don't want to take personal responsibility to live sustainably with the earth, right? And take care of the soil where you're at. It's all about the money instead of, it should be all about the soil.
Oh, really, sure.
So anyway, it's been a great talk. I think we've covered, you know, every possible thing, you know.
Absolutely.
In the world.
Nice. Interesting.
So anyway, I'll let you go. Have a great night, and I'll get the recording up probably tomorrow.
Great.
All right, Par from Sweden. Thanks, everybody. It's been Par from Sweden and Bridgette and Dolgoff. And so, yep, we just yacked on. See, we're like, you know, we're talking together from two different countries, you know. See, we can get along, so why can't everybody else get along? Bye.
Bye.